Are you planning a trip to Albania and wondering how much you should budget for your trip? Then you're in the right video. Albania is one of the most affordable countries in Europe to travel to, and generally speaking, it's a very affordable country to travel in, on a global level even. I traveled to Albania for 2 weeks this year and the prices really surprised me, like in a positive way, because everything was so affordable. In this video, I will share exactly how much I spent during 2 weeks in Albania and also give you some recommendations on how much you should expect to pay for food, transportation, accommodation and activities. Keep in mind that I tend to travel on the lower budget. I'm not the extreme low budget traveler, even though I have tried staying on strangers' couches, which by the way was a fantastic experience, but I definitely prefer to watch how much I spend, eat at local places to save money, and I don't mind staying in the budget-friendly hostels or guest houses to save money, even though that wouldn't be the most comfortable option. So that being said, I don't need the most comfortable or convenient option if that means that I can save some money. So with a small introduction out of the way, let's start off with some juicy bits. How much did I actually spend on my 2-week trip to Albania this year? Well friends, that would be 55,030 lek, which at the time of filming this equals to about 527 euros or 574 USD. I have to have my laptop here so I can remember the numbers. That's not too bad. That's a daily average of 3,930 Albanian lek, which is about 37 euros or 41 USD. If you think about the budgets that are usually recommended for Southeast Asia, if you're traveling on a budget, that's usually around 30 or 40 euros per day. In Europe, that's not bad at all. And Albania is a part of the Balkans, which generally speaking is a very affordable travel destination and area to travel in. And this is a very realistic daily budget for anyone who is traveling on the lower budget, but you could even spend less than that. You could spend around 20 to 25 euros even a day to get by, and if you just stay in hostel dorms, eat a bit cheaper than I did, and maybe don't do as many paid activities, because I did do some paid activities, but if I wouldn't have, then the budget would be even lower. And of course you could also spend more than this if you want to always stay in very fancy private rooms and you would like to eat at fancy international restaurants rather than eating local, then just expect to pay a bit more. But yes, Albania is still a very affordable travel destination. Before moving on to breaking down how much I spent per category, on accommodation, on food, transportation, activities and shopping, let's keep in mind some points that I want to note before continuing this video. So the coast of Albania tends to be a bit more expensive than other cities and the capital. And I traveled in March and April, which is off-season, so prices of accommodation might be a tad higher during summer, but still it's very affordable. For example, in Berat, I stayed at Maya Hostel, which I highly recommend. It was a really lovely hostel and that cost me 11 euros per night in March, and now I checked for a few days in August for a random time period. At the same hostel would cost 14 euros a night, but the price difference seemed to be more dramatic on the coast. So for example, if you're traveling to, let's say, Samil, where I stayed for 4 nights in March, in the end of March, I paid 14 euros per night, but the same accommodation there was 50 euros a night in summer, in peak season. So definitely more dramatic of a price increase there during peak season on the coast. And also something to note is that I traveled solo, so everything that I paid for by myself. But then if you would travel with a partner or a group of friends, then you can of course split costs of the private rooms, of maybe an Airbnb apartment or something like that. So then the prices might vary a bit. So let's start off with accommodation. So during this trip I stayed in both hostel dorms, I stayed in one apartment by myself, and I also stayed in a private room at a guest house. And I spent time in Berat, Gjirokastër, Samil and Tirana, and my daily average for accommodation was 1229 lek, so about 12 euros or 13 USD a night. And again, if you're traveling during peak season, then prices do go up a bit, so definitely on the coast in places like Himare, Sarande, Samil, just expect to pay a bit more per night for your accommodation during summer especially. And of course, if there aren't any hostels available and you're traveling solo, then it's gonna be a bit more expensive, because hostel is usually, like a hostel dorm is usually one of the cheaper options if you're traveling by yourself. So keeping in mind all of this, what I said here, I would recommend budgeting about 15 to 20 euros per person per night for accommodation, if you're traveling on the lower spectrum of the budget. Lower budget spectrum. If you're traveling on a low budget, essentially. Let's move on to transportation. So Albania has a really well-functioning bus system, and no, it's not as modern and as organized as in many Western countries. Like, you don't usually need to book anything in advance. You just walk up to the bus and ask where the bus to, for example, Berat is leaving from, and then they point you to the right direction. You go have a seat in the bus, and they charge you at some point, so just having cash on you. I do also have Albania travel tips, a travel guide, which I can link somewhere here and in the description. But yes, buses are a great way to get from one place to another, especially if you're on a budget, because they're really cheap and really cost efficient way to move around in Albania. And as I said, they do function really well, so there are usually multiple buses leaving from one place to another per day, each day. I spent in total approximately 6,400 lek on transportation, which is about 61 euros or 67 USD on all transportation, which mostly was buses, like local buses, city buses, except for one expensive trip with the taxi from Tirana airport to the bus terminal in Tirana, because there didn't seem to be any other convenient way for me to get there, from the Tirana airport to the Tirana bus terminal, which was fine. It was just a one-time thing, but it did cost me about 20 euros to get from Tirana airport to the bus terminal, so it was quite expensive. And yeah, just a note, taxis in Albania tend to they seem to be really expensive compared to how affordable the country is traveling, in general. Otherwise everything is really affordable, but taxis are just, for some reason, they're really not affordable at all. So buses I took during my trip in Albania was from Tirana to Berat, Berat to Gjirokastër, Gjirokastër to Sarande, and from there to Samil, and then Samil to Sarande, Sarande to Tirana, and then also a few city buses in Tirana, plus a bus from Tirana city center to the airport for 300 lek. And I think budgeting 5 euros per day for transportation is realistic if you're not planning to move around every day, which I didn't, by the way. I usually stayed about 3 days in each place, which was fine, and that way I can also save some money by not moving around every single day. And if you're traveling even slower than that, then you could expect to budget even less than 5 euros per day. But I think 5 euros per day for transportation is a very, very realistic budget for you. So I spent also an average of 458 lek per day, which is about 4 euros or 5 USD. And then the city buses that only run within a city, which also is a good way to get around in Tirana, for example, they were around 30 to 40 lek, which is just under 1 euro or 1 USD, less than that, so really, really cheap. And if you would like to check the prices between each city and also know about the timetables for buses, then you can check out albaniatourguide.com. That blog has really good information about the buses in Albania, and from my experience they did seem to always be correct. So yes, definitely a good site to check out if you're traveling in Albania. Let's move on to food. And if you know me, you know that I really enjoy food. And food is definitely something that, well, I could spend less on, but then again, I didn't really splurge on food in Albania either. I usually had like my biggest meal of the day was always dinner, which I mostly ate out, but I usually shared some meals with or some dishes with some friends that I ate with. And then what I usually did with breakfast was that the place that I stayed at either provided me with breakfast, or I just went to the grocery store and got like some yogurt and granola for breakfast. So yeah, I didn't spend nearly anything on breakfast because yogurt is really cheap in Albania. In total, for food, I spent 19,340 lek, which is about 185 euros or 200 USD, which was 1,381 lek per day on average, which is then 13 euros or 14 USD. What I usually did for lunch was that I had some groceries, like just a small snack in the middle of the day, or then I got myself a burek from like a close by coffee shop, because that was also really affordable. And a burek, like a big piece of burek, was usually around 100 lek, so about like €1, less than that, which was really convenient. And then, as I said, dinner was usually my most my biggest meal of the day, and usually I did eat out daily for dinner, and usually I spent about 1,000 lek, which is just under 10 euros, so about 10 USD, something like that. And also for dinner I did usually have a glass of wine or a beer, so keeping that in mind, like food is generally speaking really affordable in Albania, especially if you stick to the local dishes and local restaurants, which by the way is really good. Albanian food is super good. I'd recommend budgeting 15 to 20 euros on food each day, especially if you're planning on eating at local restaurants and keeping like your diet to local meals, because those are really good and also quite affordable. And let's move on to activities. So I didn't do any like crazy expensive activities during my stay in Albania. My most expensive activity was a winery tour, which I will talk about really soon. But in total, I spent 7,000 lek for activities, which is 67 euros or 73 USD, which makes a daily average of 500 lek. So approximately 5 euros or 5 USD each day for activities. So as I mentioned, the most expensive activity I did in Albania was a tour to Alpeta winery, which was organized by my hostel in Berat. This was a really fantastic experience, and this included like a private shuttle to and from the winery, and also a tour of the winery, like the area, and also quite a lot of wine, like loads of wine, and also some snacks in the evening. And this was 3,000 lek, which is about 29 euros or 31 USD. I think this was totally worth it. Albanian wine isn't like exported a lot. It's not like a huge export product, but Albanian wine is definitely really good and drinkable. And also Alpeta winery was really nice. We met the owner and spent some time with him, and he was just a really nice guy. So definitely recommend that if you have a chance to visit a winery in Albania, and definitely Alpeta winery. It was a lovely experience. Other activities I did in Albania included the entrance fee to the Butrint National Park, which is near Samil, for 1,000 lek. And also I did a guided tour around the Skanduli house in Gjirokastër for 200 lek. I paid for the Bank Art 1 and 2 tickets, which was 800 lek combined. I also, in Tirana, I did the Daiti cable car for 1,200 lek. I feel that I did all of the activities I wanted to do in Albania. I went to the winery, I went to a few museums I wanted to visit, and just had a really good time. Otherwise, I did also some free activities, including hiking to the Ali Pasha Bridge in Gjirokastër, which was really nice, going to the beach in Samil and things like that. I think budgeting €5 each day for activities is a really good and realistic budget if you're someone who doesn't need to do the most expensive extreme activities. Okay, let's move on to my final category, which is miscellaneous and shopping. I spent 2,960 lek on miscellaneous, which was basically getting an eSIM for my phone with mobile data upon arrival from Vodafone, and also getting some toothpaste. So that was my miscellaneous. And then I spent 2,120 lek, which is about €20 or 22 USD on shopping, which was a pair of earrings made locally that I got in Berat, and some mountain tea to bring home with me, which was basically just a few cents. So most of it was a pair of earrings. I'm not really someone who does a lot of shopping while I'm traveling. I just don't want to put money on it. So yeah, if you're someone who loves shopping and loves buying things abroad and buying souvenirs, then definitely budget some more for your travels. So with all that out of the way, how much would I recommend for anyone traveling to Albania as a daily budget? Well, I think 30 to 40 euros per day will get you already quite far, especially if you're traveling off season, which is what I did. But if you're traveling during peak season, maybe budget a bit more, around 40 to 60 euros a day. And this means that you're eating at local restaurants, don't need the fanciest accommodation, move around every 3-ish days, and only do a few chosen paid activities during your travel in Albania. And also, if you use public transportations to get around from one place to another, that is my recommendation for a daily budget for Albania if you're a semi-budget traveler like myself. I really hope you enjoyed this video and got some value out of it. I really enjoyed traveling around Albania. I think it's a fantastic budget-friendly travel destination in Europe. And if you would like to see some more Albania content and watch my Albania travel vlogs, I will leave the playlist here so you can go and check out that next. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!